incorporate trails in with the existing rail line around the bay. And in the event that that option becomes available to use rail, there could be some kind of a compromise where the trail system could work, it could be adaptive. You may recall that suddenly we found San Francisco busing people up from their jurisdiction, truthfully caught them putting people on a bus. We called it Greyhound therapy, and it was because of a board break or whatever the reason was. I fired off a letter to the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, which prompted immediate responses from some of their board members. Although I would say some of it was politically motivated, because there are always differences of opinion on that board and the mayor's office. But in fact, we were able to stop that, and they've expanded it. I thought, well, that's wonderful. You want to use local talent, you want to offer them the opportunity to move into a field where they're needed, and they're really great paying jobs.
As part of our series of in-depth interviews with candidates for Humboldt County Supervisor, the editorial board of the Humboldt Sentinel sat down with incumbent 1st District Supervisor Jimmy Smith here at Has-Beans Cafe just a few days ago.
Hi, Jimmy. Mark!
What's up? How are you?
I'm okay, I think. I just admittedly a little bit overwhelmed here lately.
So where do you rate like the revitalization of ports and that part of the county? Like as far as the importance of your district, of our district, my district too, I guess.
Yes, it is your district. Well,
I mean, do you think it's gonna create a big, do you see an immediate spike in in tax revenue being brought in if fishing is revitalized and the accommodation is there for prospective fishing businesses?
Well, I can tell you from the fishing perspective, my understanding, and I'm out, but I'm still in. In fact, I have some things coming up on the board agenda to talk about the potential transfer of allocation for what's left. The trawl fishery's been really narrowed down. Those buyback programs, mostly self-funded by the fishermen. But there's also a proposal on the table to allow transfer of catch quotas to other permit holders in other states, which may not only just affect the viability of the local fleet here, but the infrastructure, because the fleet's been minimized, salmon, crab, tuna, and trawl, that there's, you have to have some infrastructure left, the ice companies, fuel companies, the costs that are spread out amongst all of the boating public and commercial boat users within Humboldt Bay. If you lose any portion of that, then you compromise the ability of those businesses to stand. So it's more or less trying to maintain. I don't think you'll ever see a spike. Oh, brand new fishery, more boats. All of those. In fact, I worked on some of the limited entry programs, or limited entry fisheries. Doesn't mean nobody can get into them. What it means is, just because you have a strong fishery in, let's say, Dungeness crab or bottom fish, that you're not going to have boats from Alaska or Washington coming down here to take advantage of a localized fishery here. They're limited in their participation through legislation that the industry carried forward. So there's going to be long-term stability. In fact, over time, more of those products, I think, are going to be like you see with, let's say, dairy, for example. Creamery products, expansion of markets across the state and across the nation. Look at cheeses, which are immensely popular here now. And look at some of the managed cocoa pulau, look at wine inflatables. Those are things that are going to expand, and there's potential to use other transportation mechanisms, they'll need to be enhanced. As far as their port participation, when I was on the Harbor District, I remember quite some time ago, I was part of the latter part of the EIR when it got finished up, and then the deepening project took place as the only opportunity to be able to access the 65% funding to deepen the port, so that it was ready for whatever type of commercial activity, industrial activity would be accommodated in those areas that were already specified in the zoning. Other things like the new boat ramps and parks and the restoration of the South Spit, which used to be a huge homeless community with garbage and gunfire over my head, things like that that have been restored and now accommodate every type of recreational activity. Those are there to enhance tourism, work with the Iliad tribe, and BLM, Cowfishing Game, to make that happen, and ultimately put in things like our dream, the Interpretive Center, and property that's been acquired out on Bluff, the old lighthouse ranch.
You know, I don't know. I mean, it's for me, it's kind of, you know, as much as I'd like to see like the port developed, I just think that, you know, sort of this push that exists to bring in these, you know, big, huge container ships is sort of unnecessary in a way. I just think that the port, as it stands now, is potentially viable for, you know, potentially viable to produce just using sort of what's here and taking what we have here and with and just utilizing what currently exists. Am I wrong there? I mean,
well, I think that when we looked at the management plan for Humboldt Bay a number of years ago, the idea was to look at setting aside certain areas for protections of natural resources. And part of that was related to what we just talked about, trying to sustain commercial fisheries. You had really important commercial fisheries nursing areas, including some of the mariculture operations with oyster raising. Those types of I think, look into the future and see what areas you needed to set aside for conservation of natural resources and enhancement even. If you look at the importance even for Humboldt Bay as a nursery for Dungeness crab, it's unbelievable. The bottom in certain areas will be carpeted with juvenile Dungeness. So there's a worth to that as they recruit into fisheries and then all the related employment for what's going to happen with seafood production and all the employment. But also on the peninsula and over on the deep water side of the city of Eureka, what businesses could we make sure that in the zoning we emphasized existing and people could pull up information from the GIS system, which we had worked on several years ago. They could look at if they wanted to participate in some kind of option for a business, like they have over in the area adjacent to the Orphanger, in fact, between Dock B. Then they knew exactly what the zoning was and what they could present as an option when those properties became available. The same on the peninsula, although a lot of that's privately owned, there still are properties that are viable for some type of commercial activity.
The roads coming out from the Lost Coast, coming from Honeydew through Petrolia to into Eureka even, or even into south of Ferndale there, coming out.
Those roads are, because of the fragile nature of that whole landscape, it's always moving, they're difficult to keep up with, and they're a priority for my constituents out in that area, especially the road to Petrolia. It's got some bad spots in it, but I've talked to Caltrans about that. Would they like to link up? What they'd like to do is give me the highway stretch, or give us the highway stretch between Fernbridge and Ferndale.
Right,
And
okay.
we have 1,200 miles of road right now and a continuous diversion of funds back to the state. So road maintenance is a big enough issue. $135 a barrel for oil, you can imagine what it would cost to resurface, and we are doing some of that. But the 101 corridor is, to have that open year-round so people can have a dependable source of transportation, and those manufacturers that we talked about have access to the south and then across the U.S. is probably one of the most important things along with improvements to the airport which are occurring. The rail, they're going to do an assessment of the rail, and those answers, including fish passage issues all up through the canyon, are going to be right in front of everybody in the near future. So those decisions on viability will be for everybody to make. It'll be available.
What's your position on local mass transit? Do you think that rail line should be used for local light rail? Do you think instead the bus service on an improved highway system should be improved at all? What's your take?
I can say that I think there are probably options to incorporate trails in with the existing rail line around the bay. And in the event that that option becomes available to use rail, there could be some kind of a compromise where the trail system could work, it could be adaptive. We've done the applications. The Harbor District did a number of years ago and made some money available for inter-transportation around Humboldt Bay and out to the edge where it could be a facility where offloading could take place and then transported to the south. So there are a number of alternatives that could provide for both.
Just to have so the HTA can come down Myrtle here, revitalize the whole bring a bus down Old Arcata Road and lock up to, I think it's ridiculous. I believe now maybe the city buses maybe now run out to Redwood Acres. Is that correct? If I'm not mistaken.
I don't know how far out Old Arcata Road they go, but there is a regular service between Arcata and Eureka that's really highly used. So is Humboldt State. They've got a special pass program.
Right.
It's taking a lot of cars off the road. Enhancing that is, if you look at Broadway at peak times, we're already maxed out, and Myrtle's another one that's got to be incorporated into the whole assessment for what happens anywhere around Cotton or South Eureka. How can we get more public transportation?
And I believe CR, did they just not give their own approve their own version finally after years of a jack pass?
I haven't seen the approval, but it's been a high profile issue for them trying to get it so that they can do a similar program to.
I remember when I was there trying to work with it at CR, we essentially gained quite a bit of approval for it. Then the academic sort of Senate sort of stepped in and said, well, we're now going to require you to have to require this many amount. Well, we have to require for this to pass. You have to get this many amount of votes in an election in order for it. And the number was just something that probably CR's never had in any of their elections and such. But do you think that what do you think of the new president? I mean, are you pretty? Do you think he can bring a lot to CR and bring CR back to the to the productive level that it's been?
Yeah, I have not spent a lot of time with him, but I have with some of the trustees, some of the board members, and I think they're pretty well aware of what hurdles they've got in front of them. Interestingly, I think there's a brand new move, but there's a move to better accommodate some of the needs of those people we talked about earlier, the manufacturing sector jobs. There is actually quite there's a need to respond to a certain level of employment for some of those manufacturers, and some of them struggle with trying to find people that are that have the educational background to be able to step up and perform those tasks. So what they're talking about doing right now, and I think we're going to see very soon, is adaptive educational opportunity. You tell us where this gap is, whether it's in auto repairs and mechanics with the newest electronic age, whether it's in the manufacturing sector of the needs for wing inflatable or some of the...
I remember one time being down and talking to the guy who runs the tool and die department down there, and I asked him, what do people do once they graduate from here, and he said, go to Hayward.
Well, that's what's exciting about this, and I'm a believer in this. It happened, as you know, with nursing. We didn't have the program that really expanded enough to meet our needs within this community. Which, although it's grown a little bit, it's still, there's an aging population and need help. So both Humboldt and CR's got a waiting list now for their nursing program, and they've expanded it. I thought, well, that's wonderful. You want to use local talent, you want to offer them the opportunity to move into a field where they're needed, and they're really great paying jobs. So that's happening, and what John and I talked about is there are other manufacturing sector opportunities in information technology where these folks would need, there is a need there. The employers identify the needs and what their educational strategy would be through the Office of Ed in coordination with the people you talked about. CR is one example.
And plus,
and they build a program.
And if we had an interest here, keeping the products here that are produced here, keeping them floating around here, like the pulp and the wood, the benefits of that would just exponentially could come back to CR and to the...
Some folks, unlike us, aren't lucky enough to have homes. You mentioned the South Spit and cleaning that area out. Some of that workload has gone to the Multiple Assistance Center, but of course they don't even serve singles anymore, only families. What is your stance on what level of service the county currently provides the homeless population, and what more do you think needs to be done and you think can be accomplished in your next term?
Well, I started work on the homeless population about, I want to say 2 years ago, in coordination with the other agencies, with Social Security Administration and also with Health and Human Services. There's kind of a need to identify flows, and you may recall that suddenly we found San Francisco busing people up from their jurisdiction. Truthfully, caught them putting people on a bus. We called it Greyhound therapy, and it was because of a board break or whatever the reason was. I fired off a letter to the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, which prompted immediate responses from some of their board members. Although I would say some of it was politically motivated, because there are always differences of opinion on that board and the mayor's office. But in fact, we were able to stop that. There still is, though, however, if you recall, in San Francisco, they're doing park sweeps, so any of the greenbelt areas are being cleaned out at the demand of the public. To think for a second that we aren't receiving some people from those areas would be, I think, a huge mistake. They are moving around to some degree. We've been able to track some populations, and I don't have the recent data at hand. It wasn't truly significant, but it looks like it could be. My concern about homeless populations today, most notably, is you can't have unequal services in adjacent areas, or you're going to concentrate people somewhere where you don't have the ability to accommodate.
Eureka.
And I really worry that on a national level, with the economy being as flat as it is, that there are going to be cutbacks in other counties, and I worry even more on a regional basis that other states may be faced with cutbacks in their services to people, and there may be core things like mental health or sheltering or whatever it may be. You think at that point you start to move even more, more than the frequency of people just traveling through, looking a place over and maybe winding up for some reason longer term in some jurisdiction. That regional approach, it's my belief, is the only way we're going to be able to better manage. I know there's a longer term plan for homelessness, but in the short term, we ought to well know what's going on in the other counties, and we need to know what's going on related to services in other states and how we can make sure that resources are available from the federal government to those other states, so that you don't cause people to go somewhere where they can't meet the service levels.
And of course, when we talk about homelessness, it's never far removed from the topic of public safety, police enforcement. The Board of Supervisors received just this week the report from the Human Rights Commission and appointed your colleagues Neely and Woolley as the alternate to meet with the Human Rights Commission, the local law enforcement association, and the police review advocates to work out a system heretofore undeveloped in Humboldt County of either an ombudsman and or a police review board and or some sort of mechanism to not only review complaints but to make suggestions for policies, practices, and procedures. Do you think the county's moving in the right direction there? Would you like to see go a little faster, a little slower, and if so, why?
Well, I think the county accommodated the wishes of the Human Rights Commission and a number of other people from the public that came in with concerns. It was attended by a range of people, as you know, that had expertise in a lot of fields in the Human Rights Commission, but also from Health and Human Services and law enforcement. Whether that actually points to through those numerous meetings, and there are more to come with more definitive actions as they pull in more people and more resources from other areas, particularly the cities, and get their input, which is absolutely essential. Then there likely will be more recommendations coming back. In this interim period, though, my sense is, if you look at what happens in grand jury, there are resources available. If there are notable questions, allegations, problems, for people to be able to approach an independent body, that I happen to have a lot of confidence in the grand jury system. And there also is, related to that, at an elected official level, the sheriff and the district attorney are both there. And another avenue, albeit I hope it's never used in the case of a fatality, is through the coroner. And presently, even though there's discussion about at some point in time, depending on which group you listen to, more of a need or an alternative that might be explored to consolidate. The coroner still is an independent body, and that those investigations provide information in an unbiased manner. I've talked to them about that. So there still are alternatives that are in front of people that they can access to make sure that there's an unbiased opinion, good solid investigative powers and authority. So we'll continue to listen. I know I will. I want to listen to everybody that's been involved and see what their recommendations are. But I feel that today there are numerous alternatives available.
You were the supervisor who had the most trepidation towards passing the regs the county adopted in 2004 that set the 3-pound 100 square foot general rule that Gallegos, the DA, was already sort of going with as a general guideline. Of course, these were developed by that medical cannabis task force that included police, included university, included growers and so forth. With Mendocino looking at a more restrictive system, kind of going back, stepping back from the more liberal limits similar to Humboldt's towards the state default minimums, do you think Humboldt is perhaps due for a review of its medical cannabis policy, considering the number of very high-profile busts by the Humboldt County Drug Task Force just in the last couple of months of pretty massive grow operations.
Now there's a hot button question for you, and actually it's a very good one. And you were right, I was nervous about it, and still am, and knew that at some point in the future we're going to have to revisit that, whether I'm on the board or not, whoever's there, it's going to have to be dealt with. It's my opinion that, and it's probably most notable in the letter that went out several months ago to the congressman saying we ought to be legalizing marijuana. In my opinion, at that time, was not related to the safety issues on the outlying areas. This relates to large grows, the ones out in
5,000 plants.
yeah, out, and there were a couple, as you recall, a couple of large ones out on, there was one in Redwood Creek, there was another large one in southern Humboldt. Those, there may be some legitimate movement forward by Congress to address those. I don't see it in the immediate future. The danger is real. People with guns, guards, people that may not necessarily understand English because they're brought up from other countries where their only job is to guard it, and it is dangerous. My argument with it was, if you do that, just do a comprehensive request that includes educational components, how you're going to fund it, so that you make sure, like tobacco, that you have addressed the issues that I heard from the people I work with in juvenile justice, people I work with in foster parenting, and the people that have generally said we need those details incorporated into any plan or letter or request that we made. And we didn't do that. We just simply said, we want you to address legalization. On the medical marijuana part, I have plenty of problems in my district that go beyond what I voted for, and I think most people did. If you wanted to use medical marijuana for your glaucoma or cancer treatment or whatever it may be, I don't stand in anybody's way. But nor did people envision that we were going to have homes destroyed, we were going to have more competitive rent costs because of
People can just rent their
grows,
grows.
or that people were going to develop an industry as kind of a sideline based on what was seen, I think, by the majority of the population as a legitimate, it's your right to use this if you're ill. So, in my opinion, yeah, it's going to have to be addressed, and I'm watching closely what Mendocino is doing and what the city of Arcata is doing, and I'm listening to my constituents and their concerns about how can we address this and make it more reasonable.
Humboldt County voters are reminded to cast their ballots on or before June 3rd. For Mark Konkler and the rest of us at the Humboldt Sentinel, this is Charles Douglas reporting from Old Town Eureka.